Hello, and welcome to the March unit meeting, which is just kind of like our general meeting for League of Women Voters, Wichita Metro. I'm so excited that y'all are here tonight and you are with us watching and learning about Trendy transportation. We have some really awesome guests tonight, and I'm very excited for you to get to know and learn more about them, as well as how transportation impacts you and me on a daily basis. So before we start, I want to go over a couple of things and make sure that we have everything that we need for tonight. One, this is on Facebook and YouTube, and the broadcast will be on both of those stations afterwards as well. So both platforms will house the recording afterwards, as well as on YouTube, there will be subtitles 24 hours afterwards. If for some reason you are unable to access that, please reach out to us and let us know. Also, we're going to have some opportunities tonight for you to ask questions. So start thinking about it now. Start thinking about what questions you might have. We'll have some that we're going to ask the panel here in just a little bit. But it's super easy for you to go ahead and put in the comments either on YouTube or on Facebook any questions that you might have or any love that you want to give to the speakers or anybody. First, we're going to have our DEI segment. This is where we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, and all different ways that we have some really awesome opportunities for us to get to know how to be better, just to be better with other people in our society, as well as how to be really good stewards of all the people around us. So I'm super excited tonight to introduce to you Lisa Veda. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Kate.
So we're gonna play a video for you all. Lisa, I want you to still be my person and make sure that this video audio is working and let me know. So I'm gonna send it your way, and we're gonna go from there. And then Lisa will speak a little bit more afterwards.
Good morning, Mom. Morning there. Hey, man. Morning, Alice! There's no need to be awkward. Poor Bob. Like so many of us, he just doesn't know how to interact with people with disabilities.
It's pretty easy, really. People with disabilities are people first.
We need the same things that every person needs, like respect.
Good morning, everyone.
Attention! Okay. Maybe we need to be more specific.
The easiest way to show respect is to focus on the person, not the disability. It's okay. You'll get the hang of it.
One easy way to focus on the person is to watch the person signing and not their interpreter.
Or their companion.
It's really cool that you'd like to help, but do us both a favor and please ask me first. What you think might be helping? I got you. Wait, Oh no, might actually not.
If you'd like to offer me help, let me hold on to your elbow. Don't take mine.
Hey, would you like to take my arm?
Sure.
Assistive devices help us to live our lives. They're really important and really personal.
Grabbing them only makes it weird for everyone.
But please only touch our devices and service animals if we've given you permission. And don't take it personally if I ask you not to. Remember that my service animal helps me all the time. Neither of us would like it if we were separated.
Remember, we make our own decisions. We sign documents, vote, volunteer, work, and pay taxes.
We get married.
So don't determine me just because I have a smile.
Just because I'm blind
Can I help you?
does not mean I'm deaf.
No, I think Slipper was gonna come. Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I'm blind.
And just because I use a wheelchair doesn't mean that I can't sweep you off your feet.
So take a deep breath. Relax. We don't bite.
Unless we're really hungry.
Hello there, ladies. How are you?
Hello. And if you're not sure what to do, just ask.
Hi. Would you still like to see a menu?
No thanks, but can you please read it to me?
Sure, definitely.
Just treat us the way you would want to be treated, and we'll all be okay.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, Alice.
Right.
Awkward no more. Nice job, Bob. Go forth and be human. There's no need to be awkward.
Wow. What a super unique and cool video, Lisa. Share more.
I love that video because one of the things it definitely talked about was we vote. And so if you haven't been able to figure this out, this DEI moment involves probably the largest minority group, which is those with disabilities, because people with disabilities, you don't always know what that disability is. And I think we're probably a far larger group than most people realize. There's only a couple things I wanted to add to the video, and that is to say that you should say a person with a disability, not disabled person, because as the video said, I'm a person first. I don't really like differently abled, physically challenged, or crippled. Handicap doesn't bother me either as much as it does some, but I think it's best to just say person with a disability. And a lot of times I don't even say that. I'll just say, I have muscular dystrophy, rather than saying I say what the disability is. I'd also like to add something about making sure that our League of Women Voter events are accessible. This includes parking and bathrooms. And if we ever rent porta potties, please include at least one that is an accessible porta potty. I'm on the Wichita Sedgwick County Accessibility Advisory Board, and we were informed about issues with voting sites and poll workers not being properly informed on the procedures when those with accessibility issues asked for help. And this came up last month when we met for the first time this last year with a quorum. And I know that some of our league members also informed the election office about this. So we are going to be meeting with the Sedgwick County Election Office, and they're going to talk to our advisory board prior to the fall election. We want to make sure that everyone is on the same page and that every person has the right to vote. The other thing I just wanted to add is I wanted to mention the Disability Rights Center of Kansas. Their website is www.drckansas.org. That's www.drckansas.org. They help people with any legal issues they may have regarding workplace. There's even a special place there about voting. And if you look under their projects heading, you will find information about voting. And they offer free legal help to those with disabilities that may have a legal issue or just wanting to know what are my legal rights as a person with a disability. So thank you so much for allowing me to share. You're on mute.
I did the telltale Zoom thing, man. So I'm so excited that we got to have this discussion tonight and you were able to share more about what it's like to be a person with a disability. I especially love that you shared that you like the person first language, because truly it is a person first, and then there's something special about them, such as like a person with a pink shirt or a person with the high-heeled shoes. So those are some ways that you can look at, kind of how you speak about things, always putting that person first. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Lisa. Have a great rest of your evening. I am super excited to bring up some of our next guests. So our three next guests that we're having tonight will each pop up, share a little bit about what they do within the world of transportation and a little bit about themselves. First, I'm going to bring up Mike Tann. So welcome tonight, Mike.
Thank you very much, Kate. I love being here. Thank you.
Well, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into transportation. What do you do? How do you kind of engage in transportation on a daily basis?
Well, currently I'm the Director of Transit for the City of Wichita, and I've been in transportation for, I won't be exact, but it's over 30 years. I started in private industry and then moved into public transportation in 2007 back in Pennsylvania, where I'm originally from. Came to work here in Wichita in 2018 as the director to see what new ideas we could bring and what new connections we could make with more traditional areas back like we had as you see more in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a very well-funded transit state. They spend about $536 million every year on all forms of transportation. It is very progressive when it comes to lottery funds in Pennsylvania go towards transporting senior citizens and persons with disabilities. They ride bus systems basically for free. But we wanted to take also some of the things that have been missing here in Wichita, and that's generational riders. There had been a number of years, a number of decades that had completely skipped using public transportation here. And funding reflected that as well. So we've made an effort in the last 2.5 years to connect back with USD 259. We transport about 10,000 student trips a month now. And also with WSU, we're about 7,000 trips now. All of their students, faculty, and staff use public transportation for free. We also have a veterans ride free program as well. And our ADA compliant side, which is our paratransit buses that you see running around, we have about 300 trips a day that are provided to persons with disabilities within Wichita as well. So we're excited about the direction that we're going. We're also electrifying our fleet, and we're hoping to have a 100% electric fleet by 2030. But our goal is to get more operational money. We're at about 25% of the amount of operational money from the local and state level that we should be getting for a city the size of Wichita. So we're hoping that we can be impactful in the areas that we can within our budget that will justify further expenditures on the operational side from both the city and hopefully regionally as we grow too.
That is absolutely incredible. I think we think about transportation when we drive our cars or we see buses on the streets or different things of that nature, but I know it can come in so many different forms. Really fantastic to hear all the things that Wichita is doing. It's super cool. Well, Mike, thank you so much. Mike's going to be back here in just a little bit to talk when we have our full panel up. Next, we're going to bring up Alan Kailer. Alan, hello. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. Thank you.
Awesome.
Glad to be here.
Well, thank you. We're so excited for you to be here tonight. I know you kind of have a different perspective on transportation and just other ways that people move around the city. Tell us more about how you got into transportation and, more about what you're passionate about there.
All right. Well, I grew up in Wichita. I enjoyed biking. I rode on the Arkansas Park River Path all the time. Rode to school and to college using my bike. After living in other places for 40 years, I moved back here and got involved with Bikewalk Wichita, whose main goal is to make walking and biking safer and more appealing for everyone, including folks who don't normally think of themselves as cyclists or walkers. We all want to be able to easily and safely get ourselves and our families to the resources that we need to work in school, groceries, medical care, and that sort of thing. Although I came at it from a background of biking, the reason that we think that biking and walking are important for Wichita and really for every city is that it's very clear that communities that make walking and biking safe and appealing are stronger economically and socially because people are out in their neighborhood, meeting their neighbors, patronizing their neighborhood businesses and so forth. They are safer, again, mostly because people are out walking in their neighborhood and meeting their neighbors. And they're healthier, not just physically healthier because of the activity, but also mentally healthier because just being outside, getting physical activity helps your mental health as well. So our mission at Bikewalk Wichita is to make Wichita a more livable, accessible, and connected city by making walking and biking safe, equitable, and appealing.
That is incredible. I am a person that I also am an avid walker. I use that as a piece of exercise all the time. So it's so exciting to hear about other people that are really making this a priority here in Wichita because it's such a unique and a different form of transportation than sometimes we like to think about. Thank you so much.
Right.
Don't worry, you'll still Alan here in just a little bit. We have one more panelist that's with us tonight. We have Michael McCorkle. Michael, welcome. Oh, Michael, I got you on mute still. It happens to the best of us. I haven't got
I do it all the time.
Well, Michael, I'm so excited for you to be here tonight with us. Tell us more about your journey into transportation, more about yourself in that realm.
Right. I'm a native Wichitan, joined the military after high school. I ended up spending 30 years living in Berlin, Damascus, Seoul, and Oslo for the last 15. And it's been my pleasure to travel as much as I could using these cities as bases. And so I've experienced a lot of different public transportation systems and transport options in different cities and countries, different places. I've always chosen to ride bikes and to walk as a pleasurable way to get around and every place that I've lived. And I'm not a transportation expert, but I can speak from experience and having used people-friendly city transportation plans that offer mobility options for everyone, not just car owners. And my most recent experience in Oslo, which has been described as the most not the most cyclist-friendly city in the world, but the most ambitious. In 2015, they adopted a Swedish initiative called Vision Zero, which refers to the number of deaths and serious injuries related to transport, and to encourage sustainable active transportation by improving conditions for cyclists and pedestrians. And Oslo had this goal that they shall become a safe and good cycle city for all. They're going to try to reduce traffic by 1/3 by 2030 and to increase bicycle transport by 25% by 2025, which is pretty ambitious any way you look at it. And but the important thing to cite Oslo is to talk about how local leadership can decide to be more people-oriented rather than vehicle-oriented in their planning, which we see a lot here with hundreds of millions of dollars being spent on interchange improvement, and we have to call them out on the funding for active transport. And that's how I've come to know Alan and look forward to working with him more in the future as well. Anyway, back in Oslo, 2018 public opinion polls showed that 85% approved of initiatives to improve conditions for cycling. As I said, they're very ambitious. They're going to try to have 530 kilometers of these new divided, separated bicycle lanes all over the greater metropolis. When I just lived there just recently, they had over 100, and now they're over 200 already. So they're working that direction. But all of us need to do what we can to encourage our local leaders to change our focus from vehicle-oriented planning to people-oriented planning, and to focus on child safety, lower car speeds, safer school zones, safe walking, biking infrastructure, because all those things help make a city safer and more sustainable for everyone. And also to integrate active transport planning with transit planning. So that's my interest.
That's so cool, especially having someone here tonight that is, I'm really excited to hear how all three of you get to have really unique experiences and have really unique opportunities to connect with one another to help make our city be something that's more sustainable for all people, and especially with diverse backgrounds. So I am so excited that you all three are here, and I have some questions for you all and then as well as if you do have questions, like I said at the beginning, go ahead and put them them in the comment sections of either Facebook or YouTube. I have a couple that were generated beforehand from lots of users and questions there. And so then we'll also pull those up in a bit. So first, just a basic question to start us off. When we talk about transportation, what does it include? What parts of what things count as transportation?
Well, I think Mike Tann ought to answer this first because he's the professional in the field, and I'll jump in with my non-professional thoughts on it after I hear from Mike.
Thanks, Alan. I appreciate that. Well, and obviously Wichita has a very diverse transportation options for people, and cars being the one that is the one that's first and foremost. And there's a lot of reasons for that, and it's many decades in its development. But it speaks to the highways that we have and the ease that we can move about the city. But that has come at a cost, and that cost has been a lot of connectability. One of the things that I noticed when I first moved here was how you can see how the highways have intersected through pre-existing neighborhoods and created these areas that are deserts where people probably back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s easily could traverse, especially when you notice the areas that I always do around Friends and Newman, where obviously those roads were much more traditional originally, and people moved across those roads. There were lots of crosswalks, neighborhoods interacted, and you lose that. So there is a sacrifice for every type of transportation that you focus on. You go back into other cities where public transportation thrives. Sometimes speed and access suffer. So there's a balance to everything, and we need to determine what that balance is, because being so car centric, if you can afford the car, then that's a great thing. But there's a lot of people in Wichita and in Sedgwick County that can't afford the number of cars that it takes today in order to live. Back when I was raised, my mom stayed at home. My dad took the one car and went to work, and we all rode the bus to get to school and to get where we needed to go. Those days are long gone, and they're long gone in most cities. But unfortunately, the cost of car ownership comes at a lot of people's expense of not being able to get around. Senior citizens, a lot of them are stuck in their homes because their spouse, who potentially had the driver's license, no longer is here. So it does create a lot of haves and have-nots when you rely on one form of transportation. So when we look at biking is all of our buses have bike racks on them. We encourage people to use both biking and walking in order to connect to transit. We also oversee the scooters that you see around the area as well. And there's a lot of connectability that we need to build into our city, whether it's walkable sidewalks and connecting back to transit so that people can get there, and they're ADA accessible as well. So it's key to have a well-rounded, well-funded, multi-dimensional transportation system so that all members of our society and all members of our city can take advantage of everything that we have in employment, education, and to be able to get to the store and get to the doctor and do the things that are important to do. So I think from that standpoint, we need to start looking at transportation as being how many options and how well-rounded we can be, and not just become so dependent on the car, because that would be harmful for a number of reasons over a long period of time.
Yeah. So, Mike, sorry to have thrown you under the bus, so to speak, but Mike is exactly right. We usually think of transportation as being focusing on how we get around in our personal motor vehicles, in our cars, but it's really much broader. It really is everything that affects how a person gets to and from the things that they need, and employment and groceries, medical care, like I said before, but it also how goods get to the people more and more. That's becoming a big factor in the transportation, is all the deliveries from Amazon and whoever else, as well as the freight traffic to get those goods to the warehouses and so forth. And it includes all different modes of transportation, from cars to trucks to bicycles. Walking is a form of transportation. Wheelchairs, the electric scooters that we see around town, and that sort of thing are all transportation. I think, as Mike McCorkle said, what is most important, and I think Mike Tann kind of referred to this as well, is we need to think about it as, how do we get people from one place to another place, not how we get the most cars from place to place, but focus on the number of people and the accessibility to different places for people as individuals, not as drivers of motor vehicles.
I think it's very important also the concept of transportation equity. I mean, we all have tax dollars based on population, and there's a number of people that don't drive, as Mike Tann acknowledged. And I think that's very important for the planning process, that not all the dollars be used on new interchanges and things like that. But hopefully they'll be better at that here.
This is fascinating because I think of planes, trains, and automobiles when I think of transportation, but really how much more there is. And I have a slight fear of the scooters because those suckers fly. Those are pretty fast, but they're also super cool. Like, it's just crazy to think about all of those different options that are out here. Another question that I have for all of us: how does transportation policy, so creating policy at a local, state, national, all of these different places, or just like transportation, even in general, how does that impact a person on a daily basis? Sometimes I think we forget that this is how it impacts us when we think, oh, well, I just hop in my car and go.
Go ahead. I'll take that, Kate. Just from my standpoint, I think it's really to identify and to make sure we understand how important that policy is to our daily lives. The things that we hear and the things that we see in the policy makers, getting what our wants and needs are to the policy makers, because fortunately or unfortunately, a good policy can do a lot of good for a community, but bad policy can be detrimental for generations. And those are the kind of things that, again, we spend a lot of time living in the day-to-day, but don't see what the long-term impact of policies are. And we need to start looking at that. And the impactful side of policy should be one of, again, as we get back to being multidimensional, is a policy that we're doing actually going to make our air quality worse? Our noise quality worse? Is it going to make our quality of life worse over a period of time? It could have a short-term benefit, but what's the long-term benefit? And that's something we need to put into our planning model. Is as we've learned in the last year, something can happen that no one ever thought would happen. And how do we prepare for that? And how do we build policy that takes into consideration the potential for that happening, so that we don't see systems just fall off? And without the influx of cash that has come to transit, public transportation in the United States would have collapsed a year ago. Now, that always isn't going to be the case, but as policy is developed, how does it create sustainability? And I think that's a very important part of what our daily life should be, is sustainability.
That's incredible. Anybody have anything else to add? Michael or Alan, anything else that you want?
I would like to add something to that, because for example, in Oslo, when they decided to try to increase bicycle usage, one of the ways they decided to do it was to eliminate parking places, which was not very popular. And just making it more difficult, they put in a lot more toll roads in to discourage drivers. I mean, that's policy also. and it's a choice. I mean, we have to have leaders that are brave enough to make difficult decisions and support them when they do it.
That's incredible. Alan, do you have anything you want to add?
Sure. As I said earlier, really everything that we do requires either that we go someplace or that goods and services are delivered to us. So the transportation policy affects everything that we do. On the other hand, many of the policies that we have, many of the decisions that are made at a governmental or personal level affect the transportation policy in ways that aren't immediately evident. For example, the parking regulations that we have affect our transportation policy. As Mike McCorkle just said, the more parking you have, the more space, the farther you have to go in distance to get someplace. And so it affects your transportation. Our tax policy affects our transportation. The majority of the funding at the local level for transportation, for highways and streets and so forth, comes from the sales tax. And so that affects the transportation policy. So we need to focus on all of those issues at the same time in order to positively affect the transportation.
This is so, I think about it sometimes, like, I have my DoorDash or my Uber Eats that comes to my house, or I drive somewhere and do things, but it truly does, you all stated it so beautifully. It's such an impactful thing on our day-to-day lives. So I want to kind of ask another question. And Mike, again, since you are the one that works on policy day to day, you might have some answers, but Michael and Alan, you have some answers as well. Where does the majority of transportation policy take place? Do we see it more at the city, or is it at the county? Is it the state level or national, or yes, all of the above? What does that look like for us?
Yeah, I'll take that. That actually has that's the easiest answer, and it's yes, all of it. Now, some focus on other aspects than others. Your federal government spends a lot of time on infrastructure and capital and things that people feel and touch. Your state and your local concentrate mostly on a state to a degree. The state is in between the two. But the state spends a lot of time, states do, on roads and highway systems. And then locality, same way, some more than others. In my world, in transportation, you can trace the history of public transportation in the United States back to the mid-'60s, when all bus companies at that time and all transit companies at that time were privately held. And what happened is they could no longer support a equitable fare, as in what they would charge people, and still make money, because a private company has to make money. So for lack of a better term, public transportation was federalized. So what happened at that point is the federal government stepped in and required transit agencies to be formed, either as a division of the city or its own. It could be a city, county, or it could be its own municipal authority level. But the federal government said that we will fund the buses, the maintenance of the buses, and the buildings that you need in order to provide the service. And then the state and the local capacities are to pay for the service out on that the community wants on the street. So back in the 60s and 70s, you had a lot of money in both of those pockets. But as local tax dollars became harder to come by, and the stress on where that money went to, you saw that local operating, because unfortunately operating is not very pretty. It's the service that's on the street. So it's not a brand new electric bus. It's not a big fancy building with someone's name on it. It's just the service that meets the transit needs of the community. So across the board, there's been a significant drop in what I would call local, which includes state and local funding, all across the United States. But what's there takes all of those, and the best functioning organizations or the best functioning transit situations are when all work together and all fund to an equitable and a right-sized amount. And obviously those things change as time goes on, and the ability of localities to fund that get harder and harder at certain times. And transit is a situation where you can't improve transit in a recession. You improve transit before a recession so that when that happens, more people can take advantage of public transportation as their personal resources may take a hit because of a recession or, God forbid, a depression.
Yeah. So
this is fascinating. Oh, go for it. This is just fascinating.
As Mike said, there are many different layers to the funding, and you can start digging into the details. It can get real complicated real fast. For example, the federal government funds some things directly. It also has, as it does in so many different areas, it sometimes has requirements that state and local governments have to meet, but they don't provide the funding for. And so you have to comply with the federal policies, but come up with the funding yourself. And then there's layers at the state level that operate somewhat the same way. There's a regional planning authority that has influence into the funding and the requirements. And then you have the local level, the city, the county, and so forth. But I think maybe a better way to think of it, rather than how complicated it is and all the different layers, is where can you as an individual have the most impact? And that's probably at the local level, because especially in Wichita, the city officials and the county officials are very accessible, very open to input from the citizens and so forth. So where you can have the most direct impact is at your local level.
That's incredible.
I agree. I mean, participation is the key. I mean, speak out if you don't agree with policy. I mean, that's how I came to know Alan, by challenging the city council on their state legislative plan where they had overlooked active transport completely.
Well, Michael, you're so on top of this. You knew my next question. You led into it perfectly. How can a person get involved in transportation policy? How can people, what should they do? Where should they go? What meetings should they attend? What's great information sources? Oh, can't say that word 7 times fast today. What can people do?
I think citizens should attend meetings, city council, county meetings, planning meetings. 1999, I spoke or attended at some kind of transportation meeting. It was a long time ago. I don't remember, but the impression I had was that transport at that time was considered something only that poor people were using, and it wasn't anything that they were going to spend a lot of resources on, and it was quite disappointing at the time. Seems to be a lot better now, Mike, and so my compliments.
Well, and Michael, I'll dovetail a little bit on what you just said. Every city councilman has a district advisory board. I would highly recommend that citizens see when those meetings are, and when the opportunity comes up in public comment, to bring up an improved transportation network, not just transit, but an improved transportation network and fairness for all, and to really get it in front of, in our case, city council, or if it were ever become a regional standpoint, from the county commission side. But we have a transit advisory board, and we're very fortunate. All of those individuals are appointed by city council members or from agencies that use our service. We meet the third Wednesday of every month. But those individuals have direct access to the elected officials. So if they take transit very, very seriously, but all input from citizens is extremely important to them. If you go on our Wichita Transit website, their names are on there, and the way to contact them and for you to convey to them how important it is. City council meetings is the same thing. Those types of outreaches are what really politicians need to see. They don't know what they don't know. and they may not realize what's important to certain segments of our society and our citizenry here in Wichita. And we really need to make sure that everyone has an equal voice and takes advantage of those, because those are key. Because silence is not something, whether it's at the ballot box or at those meetings, that is going to serve our community well.
I agree with both of the mics on this. I think clearly the most effective way to get involved is to communicate with your city council member, and the district advisory boards are a great way to do that. Those are in normal times in-person meetings. You can go and you can meet the district advisory board and the city council members. That are now all done virtually, but still you have direct access to the city council member, and you can let them know what your concerns are. There is a comment that they're called DAB meetings, seem to be mostly concerned with the zoning issues and so forth. And that's true. That takes up a lot of the business. But the whole purpose of having the meetings is for the citizens to be able to express their concerns directly to the city council member there. So if you have concerns other than the zoning issues, you can bring them up at those meetings. So I think the best way to think about it is, as individuals, to think about where you and your neighbors struggle in terms of transportation, and what the easiest and cheapest way to affect that, to correct that might be. For example, do you want your kids to be able to play outside safely, or to be able to walk to school safely? Do you want to be able to get to the grocery store easily? If you have those kinds of concerns, tell your city council member about it and let them know. And then, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't say Bikewalk Wichita is fundamentally an advocacy organization. Our whole purpose is to make walking and biking safer in the city, and we would love to have additional help. There's lots of ways that you can get involved. We're essentially an all-volunteer organization. We're the only advocacy group in Wichita that's focused primarily on transportation issues, and we would love to get any of the people listening involved with us. You can contact us, by the way, at info at bikewalkwichita.org.
Awesome. I'm going to put that, I'm posting that to both YouTube and Facebook. So it's got that,
Great.
So you can have that information, so that if anybody's looking for things. Oh, as you guys can see, we have a ton of really awesome comments and great, just great questions and things that are popping in. I also will always say another great way to share your voice is voting. That's, I would be remiss, like I said, League of Women Voters. Alan, you're right on the thing. You got to plug your organization. So League of Women Voters, Wichita Metro, we just really highly encourage you. Your vote is also a part of your voice. So that's a great way for you to also just kind of help be a part of your community. So I have first Jane Burns. She's a great transportation expert, kind of here in Wichita, that is just really passionate about transportation. She didn't know if there's any future plans for passenger trains going north-south through Wichita. Anything that y'all know of? And if not, that's totally fine too. Any other new and exciting transportation options here in Wichita?
I would like to see it, but I don't know anything about it.
I don't have any news on that, other than what I've seen in the newspaper, which has been some time now since I've seen anything about it.
And I will add, I'm really surprised that Wichita doesn't have sustainable train service, based upon the distance that we are from other major cities, and the fact that railroads were such a strong and predominant, and it still is for freight, but to not have passenger rail service and in most cases, transit connects to those to get people, because they don't have cars, to get from train stations to where they're going. But it is a little surprising that, and I think it does speak to our car-centric society that we have here, that people would rather jump in their car and drive to Oklahoma City as compared to using a train or head up to Kansas City. And it's a shame, because it's a great way to travel, and it's a great way to create, again, sustainable ways for people to move long distances. But it is surprising that there is no passenger rail service here in Wichita.
I use the train between Kansas City and St. Louis. I lived in St. Louis and had family in Kansas City and did that one a bunch. So I totally understand. That's really, it's such a unique form of transportation. We have a question from Lonnie Wright. We were talking about funding and things earlier. What are some possible, I know we talked about like some national funding that comes down from the federal government. What other sources from funding come to transportation in Kansas?
Well, transit receives a federal apportionment every year. It's called 5307, and that's based upon a number of criteria, and it's the same criteria for all transit agencies. It's based upon your revenue miles, your revenue hours, and then your ridership, and that's put into their magic system, and that spits out a number every year that public transit receives across the country. The state allocation is really determined strictly by the state. And Kansas is a majority rural state, a lot of farming communities that don't have public transportation like we do here in Wichita. As a comparison, I think I had mentioned to you that Pennsylvania's transit budget, which understanding Pennsylvania is not like Kansas, but from the standpoint of comparing the two, Pennsylvania's transit budget is about $536 million. Kansas is $11 million. So there's a big gap there, and there are reasons for that. And then we have just Topeka, Lawrence, and Wichita, Manhattan to a degree, but that's all we have because Kansas City, Kansas is part of the Kansas City, Missouri Transit Agency. So you don't have the Philadelphias and the Pittsburghs and all those things here. So, but there is an amount of funding that is sort of just left to whatever the state legislature wants to do. And then the local transit dollars come from the general operating budget. And as Alan touched on that, on the federal side, in order to recoup or in order to capture federal money, there's what's called a local match component. So in order to receive federal dollars, the locality has to put in local match. That's the key that opens the door. So those are areas where there is an expenditure, both or money that is received for operating, but then also money that is needed for the local match to receive the federal side. And then you have traditional things that come into transit that we don't have here in Wichita, but there's gas taxes, there's attachments on sales taxes, there's millages. Topeka has a millage, but there's a lot of traditional ways that are let's call dedicated, sustainable funding sources that haven't been capitalized as of yet, but those are certainly options as time goes on, because those would be areas that would create that sustainable, dedicated funding source for operations that would be great for transit here in Wichita.
And Mike, it sounds like we actually have to target folks in the state budget planning level for how that money gets spent. Is that correct? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, my understanding from KDOT is like most transportation or departments of transportation, they tend to have, because the money that you receive, you don't expend all at once. So they tend to have fairly large war chests or reserves. And at one time, Kansas had a huge transportation funding reserve. But I think it was the governor before last or two governors ago, they did a number of massive tax cuts. And because that money wasn't protected, a lot of the gap funding came out of KDOT's budget. So they suffered dramatically because of the taking away of those funds out of KDOT's coffers, let's say. And again, you have to be careful as to understanding the demographics of the state legislature and how that's determined, and what their capacity is to appreciate public transportation. But at $11 million, that's really, even with Topeka and Manhattan and Lawrence and Wichita, that's a pretty small pot to be slicing up every year. And it hasn't grown in a long, long, long time. So yes, the local elected officials that go to Topeka, we should all be lobbying them because all of that immediately goes to operating and can improve our system. The return on investment in transit is huge. So any small incremental increase in that funding would have a tremendous impact on what we can do on a daily basis.
So, Mike, I think you've been talking primarily about the funding for transit, I believe. The funding more broadly for the transportation system, highways, streets, and so forth, is similar. As I mentioned earlier, that a lot of it comes from the federal government, a lot of it comes from the state government, and then some from the city government, mostly local sales taxes. The city has two different budget pots, if you will. It has a general operating budget that funds annual expenses, staffing, and that sort of thing. So the personnel involved in transportation are funded out of that. Then it has a capital improvement plan that funds the capital projects, road building and maintenance and that sort of thing. And so it can get complicated. But again, probably the easiest way to think about it and to approach it is to think about it at the local level, because even the federal and the state funding, as Mike Tann indicated, usually requires a local match, and it's the city that has to apply for the various grants and awards and funding from the federal and state government. So the city decision making has the most direct impact on the funding.
Sorry, y'all. I got excited and started clicking. This is great information. This is so unique. A question on some more car transport. Martha was asking, is there, somebody wants to drive like more of an eco-friendly car. I think of like a Tesla, the ones that you plug in, but there's also a lot of different options of that. Is there any plans for any charging stations throughout Wichita, or is there any areas or private businesses that are adding any sort of charging stations?
I don't know, but there should be. I mean, we need to electrify as much as possible in the future, and getting people to switch over to electric cars is definitely the right way to go. So it'd be crazy for the city not to support that important action by not having more charging stations. I hope there's a plan for that.
There are some. There's Town East has some Tesla's charging station over there, and I know there's some downtown as well. And we are in the process, just starting the design process for our new transportation center down in Delano along the river over by the ball field. That's going to have a large transit function for the Q line and for the routes that are down in that area. Not a traditional transit center like you see that's up on Topeka, more state of the art. And as we move to more of a grid system, it'll encompass a number of different things in it. But one of the areas that we're looking at very heavily is we already have 11 electrified buses right now, and we're actually going to be submitting a new grant for another 24 to get rid of all of our gasoline-powered paratransit vans, about 24 of them, and all electric with that too. And in our transportation center, we're going to try to maximize the use of solar power through solar panels on the roof, and then also to have a number of charging stations in the parking garage that would be universal for people to use. It wouldn't be dependent upon having to have a Tesla. It would be more universal from that standpoint. But to get people that would potentially use that car to drive into the downtown, park there, and then jump on the Q line, which will be all electric when it comes back online in May. All of those old trolleys are gone, and now they're all electric shuttles. But to get people to, again, incrementally start people in thinking that, well, I can park my car and leave it there during the day if I work up at Cargill, or I work at City Hall, or I work at any number of the businesses that are there. I can charge my car on solar power and come back and it's ready to go. And there's a lot of, or as people come to the ball field, or people want to come down to Delano and use those things. So our plans are to maximize that and to also make it so that it's flexible, that we can keep increasing as the demand for electric charging stations become more important, because that is obviously the trend and where it's going. So we want to be part of that as well.
That's very cool. I have a super awesome question about biking and walking here in Wichita. This is from Anya. How can communities get together to make their communities safer? So like, your neighbors or things of that nature to make things more walk and bike friendly. Do we have funds that we can invest in that, or how do we advocate for those funds? Alan, I feel like this question was teed up just for you, but anybody can hop on in.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Well, as I said, the best way to think about it is as a community, as a neighborhood, think about what it is that you think that you need, and then communicate directly with your city council member and talk to them about what can be done to accomplish that. The city council members, in my experience, are all very accessible, very responsive to your input. And if you just email them or call them, you will hear back about it. As I said, there is a dedicated budget for capital improvements if you're talking about actual construction type projects. Bike lanes, sidewalks, that sort of thing. There is a budget for that. That is, unfortunately, in transportation planning, the timeframes are very long. There is a 10-year plan for the expenditure of those funds, but it is revisited every year. So you can have input into that. And then, as I said, we at Bikewalk Wichita would love to talk to you more specifically about any particular ideas or how to accomplish something that you have in mind. We could certainly help out with that desire.
I think it's important also for folks to talk to their local Visit Wichita or Visit Kansas, wherever those places are, to tell those people that those are the kind of things you'd like to see. Just recently, the Kansas Department of Transportation had a lot of public meetings, all of which were online, where they solicited input because they were updating their active transportation study that hadn't been done in 25 years. Is that right, Alan?
Yes.
And, so they were doing that, and they were very welcome for input, and the idea of bike paths between cities and all kinds of things were discussed, and they seemed very receptive to all of it. But again, it's all about funding. Funding's going to come from people speaking up. It's all about transportation equity.
Yes, and that's a good point, Mike. There are a number of different advisory boards and committees and so forth at the city, the state, and the regional level that advise about spending on transportation, biking, and walking, transit, and so forth. And you can certainly get involved in those, as well as communicating directly with the city council members. Again, we can, with Bikewalk Wichita, can point you to what those are and help you get involved if you're interested in any of those.
I have one more really exciting, that's not really a question, but I'm excited. Martin Garcia has been really fantastic, asking a lot of kind of just having really great conversations throughout this, but he wants to start a mass transit committee at his VFW post. So Martin, if you want to reach out to us in a private message, we can send your information on to these folks and they can get connected with you for that. But like, look how exciting this is. Like, we're having these conversations and other people are getting excited about how transportation interacts with them and their city. So especially because in Wichita, how connected we are with so many things with our cars and a lot of our transit systems, but we still have more opportunities for this. I want to make sure I'm just looking through some more questions here. I think we have time for one last one. This is again from Jane. She's our big transportation advocate. Can we expect more funds for transits, rails, bikes, pedestrians, etc. from the new National Director of Transportation, Pete? I know we heard a lot about him as he was running for president and things, but what do you guys know about his plans on a national level?
What I've heard has been nothing but good. There is a large push for a huge infrastructure spending, and infrastructure covers a myriad of titles and topics, but I think everyone will agree that our infrastructure needs a great deal of attention, and it needs a great deal of spending attached to that. But what we've heard so far on the transit side and the conversations that our advocacy groups have had with him is that he is a proponent, particularly of new transportation modes and also diversity within transportation modes, not just concentrating on one, but to see all of them being developed. And that's a heavy lift from that standpoint. But to hear about potential increases in spending as compared to cost reductions or cost cutting is good at this point. So we're cautiously optimistic that from our standpoint that we will start to see some positive moves in those directions, and how we can be a part of that is everything that we push for every day.
Mm-hmm. I agree, Mike. From what I've heard, I'm very hopeful that not only will there be additional funding in terms of the number of dollars, but that the allocation and the use of those funds would be
more
in our mind better distributed to other forms of transportation. As always, the legislative process is messy. We'll see what comes out of it, but certainly hopeful.
Yep.
Well, this has been an incredible conversation. I think how frequently we forget how much transport really interacts with our daily lives. We think about kind of like, oh, I have my, I have my car, and I think about those things, but how impactful all of these different systems play on our daily lives. So this has been fantastic to learn more. Oh yeah, go ahead, Michael.
I just wanted to comment. When I lived in Oslo, I didn't have a car. I didn't need a car.
Uh-huh.
I mean, I used public transportation, and I lived, the last 2 years, I lived an hour north of Oslo, and the buses ran so frequently that I didn't even check the times. They basically ran about every 10, 12 minutes, and just I would go out and catch the express bus. In town, lots of options, bike trails everywhere, lots of walking paths everywhere. It's you didn't need a car unless you maybe had small children or things to transport once in a while. But there are a lot of people that have collectives where they share cars.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, that's fascinating. There's so many unique things that come together to really make our transportation system. So I appreciate each of you coming tonight and spending time with us. It's been a fantastic conversation. I've had so many people comment how fantastic this conversation is. So I so appreciate you all being here. And like I said, this video will be recorded. So I want to kind of finish up this evening by reminding you to check back at the League of Women Voters Facebook page frequently. We have several unique and exciting events coming up. We have our general unit meeting that is going to be taking place on the fourth Monday of April, which is going to be at the end of April, obviously. I believe it's April 26th, if I remember correctly. And so with that, on April 26th, we will be having that event, and it will be talking about redistricting and gerrymandering. So look forward to that event. The event will not be live streamed on Facebook. It will be live streamed in a different way. So please keep a lookout for that. As well as we have several other exciting events and opportunities coming up here in the next few months. So always check back, as well as there's always a wealth of information. As always, don't forget to register to vote. If you have moved recently, if you're in a new place, or you just want to double check, please let us know and look there at LWVWichita.org, or you can look at ksvotes.org or vote411.org. Thank you so much for your attention this evening, and have a great rest of your day.